Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities space. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the CEO of RUA Gold, a company specializing in gold exploration and discovery in New Zealand with permits that have a rich history dating back to the gold rush era. We're going to be discussing the company as well as the gold market. It's Robert Eckford. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Well, I want to start, as I often do, with a broad look at the macro of the commodity in question, in this case, the gold space. So I'm wondering, what are the main themes and trends you're currently watching when it comes to the gold market that you think investors should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk as of today, we're recording this on the 7th of June, and for all the gold bugs out there, we're seeing a pullback, a bit of a profit taking of gold right now. It's dropped below 2,300 for the first time in a number of months. So it's an amazing market to be in. I've been working in gold for 10 years, and I've focused on gold primarily because for this entire 10-year period, and I'm still in gold because this entire time I've always seen gold as undervalued. There's enough going on both geopolitically and from a macroeconomic standpoint for gold to still have a lot of headroom, and we've got a long way to go. I think, again, 10 years back, and I was with Barrick, and it was 1,100 gold, and everyone was in trouble. Now, fast forward to now, 2,300. We're seeing the likes of inflation. We're seeing the likes of high interest rates. And unfortunately, some of the poorer performing mining companies, they're still in trouble. So you wouldn't have thought at 2,300 gold that the industry is still lacking. And some of the big feedback you always get is, why the hell aren't equities keeping up with the gold price? Because the gold price is doing well. And there's a lot of room for the gold price to move. And we can talk projections and things like that. I'm fairly conservative when I come to that. I think gold is in its nature a very safe investment, and it's not as volatile as anything else out there. And that's why people go to gold. And in the world of volatility that we live in, that's why gold is doing so well. So I think it'll be a very steady, and there'll be these ups and downs and profit taking, but I think steadily increasing overall for the next few years still ahead of us.
And you mentioned the gold sector, the equities not necessarily following along with the metal itself. The majors have seemed to follow suit to some extent. The Agnico Eagles, the Barricks, the Newmonts, although some of them pulling back today as well as we speak. When it comes to the developers, explorers, that sort of space, it seems that's where the stock market hasn't really woken up yet in response to a new all-time high in the gold price. Um, as gold continues to climb, as I'm sure you expect it to, though you said your forecast is more modest than most, so I'm very curious if maybe you could expand on that too, and then let us know if you think when do you think that value will trickle down the mining space and cause the juniors to wake up?
So I think, I guess in two parts, maybe to start with that last part of the question. I think you're right. We do see the majors moving first, and that's classic in these gold movement cycles. The majors do move first. And let's talk about the last cycle was sort of maybe the 1800 to 2200 cycle, and that's happened in the last 3 years. We didn't see much movement from the majors then because that was happening at the same time of rampant inflation. And so that movement of gold price was really just correcting what the margins needed to make up for. And that's why now that we're breaking out and gold is moving quicker than inflation, that's now you first see the majors moving because they're the ones pushing out the most gold. They're the ones going to earn the most money. Then it will start trickling down. And so when you see it trickle down, then the next phase, and I've gone through a couple of these cycles, the next phase is into the mid tiers. And the mid tiers are starting to see that now. There's a bit more fund inflow into the sector. We would have talked about this in the past, that there's net outflows from the gold mining sector. We're actually just starting to see that, and it's turning into net inflows. And this probably started around March. I was over in Zurich, and you're getting a lot of family offices going into Zurich and looking for investments in the gold space that hadn't been there for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's a cycle. They're seeing gold as the future. And so you're getting these fund inflows. you can't just go onto the majors. You don't get as much torque to the gold price in the majors. And so the next step is slightly riskier mid tiers and developers. And then the explorers generally come last. But I say that with a caveat because the right exploration companies actually can find the uplifts and find financing very easily. There's a sector out there, and explorers have a really bad reputation. But for the right exploration company, it's actually been quite an okay market for the last few years if you've got the right project and the right management team moving it forward.
And what do
Maybe,
you think are the major? Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say that I didn't answer your question on sort of gold price outlook, and
Yes.
I think by the end of the year, I'd fully expect 2,500 to be the floor price of gold. I expect it to continually ripsaw up and down $50, $100 up until the 2,500 mark through the year. And then I think next year we're going to see interest rate cuts coming. That's when I think you really see the big movements in gold. I don't see. I obviously Bank of Canada was a first mover this week. We cut interest rates here, but I don't see a steady rate cuts coming consistently until 2025. And that's just my personal outlook.
And what do you see as the major challenges currently facing the gold mining sector? You mentioned inflation there. Obviously, the cost of mining is very high, requires a lot of energy inputs. So then you have to factor in the energy costs, oil prices, et cetera, things like that. Is that currently a challenge? And we're obviously seeing jurisdictional risk in a lot of places as well. Cobra Panama mine comes to mind when we're talking about the copper space. Niger when we're talking uranium. I mean, Mexico is now elected a president that seems quite anti-mining. What are the main challenges you see currently facing the sector?
Yeah, you've touched on a really important point there, and I really think it is a major problem with the sector right now. Is worldwide, and I've just left another mining company that I started back in 2020, and we were focused on Colombia, and similar to what's happened in Mexico, we operated these assets. Politics changed, and a much more left-leaning government came into power. Fortunately, we were very much aligned with the government, and we made it work there, and so it wasn't a Panama situation, and I think as risky as Colombia is, I think it's a good place to be. But generally speaking, in the market, the risk tolerance of these jurisdictions is getting less and less by investors, is what I see. And it's two pieces. I mean, even Canada I see as a risky area because the permitting side, it's not just the government and the geopolitical risk. It's these, and it's going to be taken maybe in the wrong way, but it's this wokeism world that we live in, where everyone is so anti-mining is just a knee-jerk reaction. They don't understand the actual positive impact mining has and how good it is for the world to be developing the economy, pulling copper out the ground, pulling gold out the ground. We need this in our economy to actually grow and prosper. And if we're not doing it, we're not growing and we're not prospering. And so you've got to educate the general population. And so the biggest risk in the mining industry right now is permitting, I see. And permitting in a lot of jurisdictions is taking way too long, and investors don't have the patience for it. If you say, give me $1 million of investment today, and in 5 years we might be permitted and we can start building. Like, so what are you going to sit there for 5 years and pay your listing fees and your overheads and your G&A costs for your expensive corporate team and do nothing for 5 years but permit? Like, it's the holding costs are way too high.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Jurisdictional risk is very real. And I find that interesting that you point out that Canada carries its own set of risks, that being the permitting time, the environmental procedure. Although, of course, you want to do everything in an environmentally sound way and protect the environment, it does get over the top sometimes. And it's kind of amazing that a lot of the politicians who are pushing for a green energy revolution, which requires an incredible amount of mining of resources, are the same ones who don't want mines anywhere in their jurisdiction. So there's some hypocrisy going on there that needs to be addressed. It's an education thing. And as you said, I want to get your thoughts on central bank gold accumulation. They continue to accumulate. It's been some very, very high levels of accumulation over the past few years, continuing this year as well. I mean, this is central banks all around the world. Some people say that that's because they're preparing for some sort of reset of the monetary system. Others just point to the fact that when the US froze Russia's FX reserves, that countries around the world started to realize, hey, we need an asset that we can take hold of to store our wealth in that has no counterparty risk, that when we become the next political enemy number one for whatever reason, that the powers that be in the West can't just freeze us out of our treasuries. What are your thoughts on gold, the central bank gold accumulation, and why do you think they're doing it? And do you think there is a potential for some kind of gold backed currency up ahead, a reset of the monetary system, or perhaps just the BRICS nations themselves using gold for trade? I believe Putin just recently announced that they're looking to create an alternate currency system that is not subject to sanctions or interference from powers such as the US. What are your thoughts on all of that? Sorry, a lot in that question, but address it however you'd like.
I think I'm totally aligned with you on that. I mean, I'm a big follower, and for the last 10 years, I've worked with the likes of Neil Woodyer and Frank Juster, and I follow Frank Juster's speeches a lot on this thing, and very much aligned with it. I'm not. I fully believe in a gold-backed currency. Do I believe there's enough golds to really back a currency anywhere out there, whether it's BRICS, whether it's yuan? I think the levels of debt we see out there are way too high to get a fully gold-backed currency. I think that's going to be a tall order. But I do believe that there is a movement towards carrying more value in a country's central bank to give its currency extra weighting. Whether it gets to the full gold standard, I think that's a harder ask, but I do think there's definitely going to be a gold weighted side of the currency, and all in all, I really actually think it's an attack on the US dollar. This geopolitical environment we're in right now of the East versus the West is actually very much an economic war as much as it is on the battlefield, and I think trade wars and currency wars and the Saudis helping build out oil currencies that aren't US dollar based, and as you said, the BRICS coming up with their own gold backed currency, and everyone is somewhat going against the US dollar because the US are being irresponsible in the amount of debt they have and how much cash they're printing, and so there is a bit of a currency war happening, and I think gold is the weapon of choice when it comes to any currency war, and that's why central banks will keep accumulating, and you will see more gold demand as the years go on.
So there has been a lot of retail participation in the gold market in the East, India and China in particular. It's from a lot of people I've spoken to, including some bullion dealers. They've said that Western retail buyers have not entered the market in a big way, and in fact are doing a lot of selling. I spoke to Steve Hankey not too long ago on the channel, and he said that gold right now is mostly a China story. That's where most of the retail buying is coming from. And once the trend moves to the West and we start to see more Western participation, that could be the second leg up in the gold bull market. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually do think the West is waking up very, very much. I think there's two things, and we see it like the generalist, and let's look at America. I was down in New York this week, and we were talking about the run on silver coins at Costco. I mean, they you put silver coins in Costco, and they're selling them. They sell out within the day. And silver is a good one to use because the barriers to entry aren't there. You don't, when you're buying a silver coin, you need $30, $40. When you're buying a gold coin, you need $2,500. So the barrier of entry of silver is really what I see as the entry point. Let's look at Nvidia, for instance. They're doing this stock split to allow more people to get into it because everyone's now targeting the retail. So you can't sit there with an entry price of 2,500. It's only a matter of time before people wake up and say, well, let's start printing 1 ounce, like half ounce coins. Let's start printing 0.25 ounce coins and make it more accessible. And then you're actually going to see a big uplift from a retail side. I completely agree that China and India definitely lead the charge on it. And there's a lot of money there looking to be deployed into a safe investment like gold. But I think as soon as you make it accessible, more accessible in the West, I think you're really going to see the uplift. And we're already seeing it, and silver is a first mover on that.
Well, let's pivot now to discussing RUA Gold. Why don't you start by giving us an overview of the company?
Yeah, RUA Gold is a really it's an exciting time right now. I mean, we're just at the outset. We just listed RUA Gold at the start of March. We're a brand new entrant to the market, and we're looking for gold in New Zealand. RUA Gold is an asset is two assets down in New Zealand, one on the North Island and one in the South Island. And the actual name RUA is Maori for two, and that's homage to the locals in the area there. So we're a New Zealand based company. The board is 4 out of 6 of us are actual New Zealanders born, and so we've got a real focus on New Zealand. And as you touched on before, when we talk about permitting and we talk about the move to make sure we're environmentally responsible, New Zealand's at one of the forefront of that. And so it's been very much overlooked. It's been a difficult place to do business for the last few decades. And under previous governments, it's very much been slow to permit any mining. It's definitely been moving, but at a very slow pace. It's been equivalent of Canada, like 3 or 4 years to permit a project. So we focused on New Zealand because 4 years ago we started seeing a shift in the politics there, and New Zealand's in a recession right now. They've got economic shrinking, they've got no jobs. The young people are leaving, going to Australia to work on the mines, and the population there have woken up, and they had an election last November, and this left wing government was voted out overwhelmingly. Jacinta Ardern had run that country and run it very almost like a dictator through COVID. Some extreme measures were put in place, and I think people woke up and were sick of the sort of politicians over abusing their power. And so she's out, and the new guy that's come in as of November last year is a guy called Chris Luxon, and he was the CEO of Air New Zealand up until 2020. So you're getting a leader that's actually very business orientated and actually very fiscally responsible. So he's not looking at just building out budgets that have huge deficits. He wants to create a very strong country, and in his first 6 months in power, he's already introduced a fast track bill to take permitting in New Zealand from what is usually 3 to 4 years, and he's put a 6 month cap on it. So it's called the fast track bill, and it's just passing through Parliament. And anyone that has a mining project that's ready to be built has entered into that process. And so in what is now 5 months' time, we should start seeing projects coming online into construction in New Zealand. So it's a really exciting place to be doing business. And our assets are in historical producing areas. So this is not a green fields, don't know if there's gold there scenario. We know there's gold there. And so it was mined up until the 50s. 2 million ounces were taken out at around 25 grams a ton. So really high grade gold area. So we've got a positive government, we've got a great asset. And then the management team are all stars. We've got everyone on that team has built billion-dollar companies before. There is no one that has this track record that's untested. We all worked in gold. A lot of us are Kiwis. And so you've got the team, the assets, and the jurisdiction, which is the trifecta for success.
Well, I want to dig into a few different points you made there, starting with New Zealand as a jurisdiction, because when people think of gold discoveries, New Zealand isn't usually at the top of the list. So, talk to us about the history of gold in New Zealand and how you're using that information to your advantage as well.
Totally, yeah, and that's a very common theme I seem to get is that New Zealand isn't on the radar of anyone, and that's the opportunity. New Zealand's gold rush back in the 1800s, when gold rushes were happening around the world, New Zealand's gold rush actually produced more gold than California's gold rush. There is a lot of gold down in New Zealand, and so that was all happening in the 1800s, and as New Zealand became independent from its British colonizers, they actually used gold to bankroll that whole country and make it independent. So gold is the reason that New Zealand is fiscally strong and a first world country today. So it's got a long history of gold. As I said, it was in our specific pieces of land, it's been mining gold up until the 50s. And it was only because of technology that they stopped mining. We've got these areas of underground mining that went down to depths where they hit the water table. And back in the 50s, they didn't have the technology to continue down. And so the opportunity still exists there at depth, and now dewatering an underground mine is commonplace. So the gold is there, the history is there, and Oceana Gold have been in New Zealand for a long time now, and Newmont actually sold to Oceana Gold the two gold mines down there, and so there's been gold exports coming out of New Zealand. The one thing that's been lacking though is expansion and new projects, and again that speaks to the historical governments that have been in place. So you've got an area that has operating gold mines, but there's no new opportunities, and that's where we go back to the what we call the brain drain of if there's no new jobs for the young up and coming generation in mining, then they go across the waters to Australia and work on the mines there.
Well, let's hone in on the two gold districts you're exploring in. Could you give us some color on them, the Reefton Goldfield and the Haraka Goldfield?
Sure, yeah. Let's start on the North Island is the Haraki Goldfield. It's a tenement we picked up there last October called Glamorgan. And to set the stage, we're in a mountainous region in the North Island, and our gold tenement where we're going to start exploring, and we should have drilled. We're in a permitting phase right now. We expect to be drilling there by Q4 at the end of the year. We're 2.8 kilometers away from Oceana Gold's biggest pipeline project called Wharekirauponga, or they shorten it to WKP. Oceana Gold have been in the area for a long time, just about 15 kilometers south from these WKP and our tenement Glamorgan. 15 kilometers south is the Waihi mine, and the Waihi mine has been in operation for over 20 years. It's produced more than 10 million ounces of gold. So we're talking a district that has huge deposits. It's an epithermal style deposit, this region, and it's all volcanic. So you think Ring of Fire, epithermal style deposits. We're in Japan and Japan Gold. You think the California belt, where all California's epithermal gold mines came from. Papua New Guinea, these sort of areas is epithermal gold. So it's really high grade gold. The reserve of WKP, Oceana's asset, which is less than 3 kilometers away, that's got a measured and indicated gold contained of 1 million ounces at 16 grams a ton. And just in case any of your watchers aren't familiar with gold and gold stories, the average gold grade being produced in the world today is under 1 gram a ton. And you think 16 times that is their reserve grade. And that essentially means you move 16 times less dirt to get the same amount of gold as our competitors. So the economics on it are unreal. So we've got a really nice asset there. The proximity is amazing. Simon Henderson, our COO, was actually on the discovery team that found WKP when he worked for Oceana Gold. And so he's got a long history in the area. He knows the geology really well. He's plus 50 years experience as a geologist. So he's not a new guy on the block. He's done this before, and he's done this in this exact area before. So he's a huge asset to the team. I'm the spokesperson. I sit here yabbering away on podcasts with yourself, but at the background, Simon is actually the real brains of the team, and he's got the geological knowledge down in New Zealand. He's there full time, and he's exploring down there. So that's our North Island asset. I'll just add the cherry on top. As I said, we picked it up October last year. It was through a natural land acquisition with the New Zealand Petroleum and Minerals. And what happens in New Zealand is Oceana Gold held this property. But if you don't convert your exploration property to a mining property after 10 years of holding it, and you do that by declaring a resource, you actually have to hand it back. And so the important thing here is they had to hand it back. The day it was handed back, we had an application in. We paid $4,000 for this. And so the accretion, the value uplift for shareholders is exponential. I mean, if we find any gold in here, we're making a profit. And we've already found surface rock samples there of 95 grams a ton. So we do know this is all the surface trends are showing us there's gold in the ground here. So that's our exciting earlier stage asset. As I mentioned, on the South Island is very different. It's this orogenic style deposit. It's in this area called Reefton. We've got 56,000 hectares, so a really nice land package. And this is where we've been working for the last 4 years as a private company. before we've listed the company. So this isn't a quick gold market's running and New Zealand politics are good. Let's find some assets and quickly list and take advantage of it. This has been a very systematical approach that this management team is taking. We've spent 4 years looking at the Reefton district and our assets there. We're drilling today. We've already done 5,000 meters of drilling. Some of the great intercepts we've already had is 10 meters of 12 meters of 10 grams a ton. So we're seeing some high grade intersects already, but we're not seeing, as I said to you before, that the historical production was 2 million ounces at 25 grams a ton. And so that's the grades we're looking for. Great that we're finding 10 grams a ton. That's very economic in today's world, but we're really on the hunt for high grade gold. And so we've got a great land package there. The historical workings are on our property, and we're going to be drilling now under mine, near mine, to actually find the high grade intercepts.
Well, you've mentioned the team a few times now and some key members of that team. Could you maybe fill us in a little bit more on that piece of the puzzle and start with yourself, your background in the gold industry, and how you came to become the CEO of RUA Gold, and then any other notable team members you'd like to discuss as well?
Sure, yeah. I think so. My background, I've coming on 20 years working in mining. I started my career in Perth on the iron ore mines out there, and then I moved over to the Congo, and I lived on a copper mine and worked a few years on a copper mine. And then that, from a personal standpoint, wasn't great for my relationship, as anyone can understand. Not many spouses want to move with their partners and live in the Congo. So we bootlegged out of there and we went off to Canada. And I was lucky enough to land. I started with Barrick, and I mentioned I started with Barrick 10 years ago. And that was in a time when they were decentralizing and moving their groups out to the mines. And so I had a bit of a decentralization contract role. But then shortly after that, I fell in with Neil Woodyer. And Neil Woodyer has been a guy I've worked with for the last 8 years now. He's a titan in the industry, and he's taught me a lot on how to build up companies. And so I came in with a lot of operational knowledge. Neil's taught me a lot of M&A and corporate and company building strategies. And so I've had the fortunate role of starting at RUA Gold with Neil, and that was a shell company when I joined them. And we built it up to a 600 million market cap company with 5 assets, 4 of them producing. And we sold it off to Equinox Gold. A week later, we were all sitting there. Equinox Gold had taken everything over. And Neil and myself and Doug Bolview are sitting in Vancouver, and we said, let's do it again. And we started Aris Mining. And Aris Mining was a $5 million shell company with some great names behind it, like Ian Telfer as a chairman, David Garofalo on the board, Peter Moroney on the board. And we put that team together to go out and look for assets. And we focused on Colombia. We saw the big opportunity in Colombia. And that's where we spent the next 4 years. So I started that company with these guys in 2020. Today, it's a 750 million market cap company. It's NYSE listed, it's TSX listed. So, and I was the CFO for that company. So I'm a chartered accountant by background, but I'm very much focused on mining. And so having that mix of both operational experience and really understanding the business, and then bringing that into a bit more of an entrepreneurial dynamic role and actually how to build companies is really important. It's really what I enjoy doing. And so Aris got to a size where it was needing maturity. And I'll be the first to admit, when you have to put policies and procedures and SOX compliance into a company, I'm not the right CFO to run it. And that's where Tyron Breitenbach is a director at RUA Gold. He was the SVP Capital Markets. He's an investment banker background. He and I were working together. I'd help him with pitches of Aris. And he saw the opportunity for me to move over to RUA with my Kiwi background, with my operational background. And I went and met Oliver Lennox King. And so Oliver is the other guy that's definitely worth mention. Oliver is, as I mentioned, he's built Rox Gold, he's built Frontier, he's built billion-dollar companies before. He's pushing his into his 70s now. He's not doing this for the money. He's made enough money. He's doing this because he loves doing it, and he loves New Zealand. And so an amazing person to have as the chairman of the company. 11% owner of the company, and this is not a company that's giving out any free stock. There's no one sitting here with 1 cent paper. Everyone's sat there putting money in and writing checks. And so we've got a really committed team, a team that have done it before, and a team that love building companies. This is not your normal explore co, let's drill some gold and hope for the best. This is a company that's going to be built in a very rigorous way.
Well, you mentioned you're drilling right now. Could you give us some more details on that drill program and also what your plans are for the future? Any upcoming catalysts for the company that investors should be looking out for?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're brand new to the market, so we'll split it in two. We've got corporately, we're maturing our shell company that we completed the RTO with. So we completed the RTO in March, 7.5 million in the bank. We've been drilling since December last year. So as of today, we sit with $5 million left. That drilling campaign keeps us drilling till April next year with our current burn, on the assumption that we also start drilling on the North Island in December. So when we look at our cash flow projections, we'll have a drill rig in the North Island, a drill rig in the South Island, and we'll keep drilling until April next year before we need to go to the market for any more money. That gives us a lot of time for bringing catalysts to the market. So let's talk catalysts from an operations point of view now. So then you've got permitting in the North Island. So as soon as we get successful permitting there, that's a really good sign to investors that New Zealand's open for business and they want more mining. And then we've got drills turning in the South Island. We have a 2,500 meter campaign ongoing in the South Island. We will have exploration updates coming to the market every 6 weeks. We have one drill rig turning right there, and that's really to bring drill results and prove out concept to our investor base and any new investors that come into it. Once we are adequately valued for these intercepts that we're already seeing, these 10 gram a ton intercepts, once we feel like we have the right valuation and we've delivered enough catalysts, we'll look to tap the market. And so I'm filing a shelf prospectus right now. And so we'll be able to tap the market in very short order on the back of some good catalyst news to the market and make sure that when we're doing things, we're an exploration company. So at this stage of the game, we have to raise more money. I mean, that's not a secret to anyone in this industry, but you want to do it in an accretive way to shareholders. And so we were halted at 10 cents. We've never traded below 10 cents. Today, I haven't checked. I think we may have closed around 19 or 20 cents. So we've got a 2x on where we started. We expect it to continue on this upward trajectory as we keep releasing news results. And we expect anyone that's putting money in to be doing it at higher levels as we move this company forward.
Fantastic. Well, Robert, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to put links in the description below to RUA Gold's website as well as social media for people who want to learn more about the company. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with the audience. It's been a blast.
Thanks very much, Jesse. Good to be here.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.